It's right here. Letter from Mr. Miller requesting that.
Okay, let's get started.
I first, I motion. I remember now that I'm looking at it, but I don't have any notes.
Hey Carla, do you have your safety
I'm okay, yeah, I do. I didn't look it over very closely, that's so.
from, you should have that copy and then it would show on there from your last time.
On the back top.
Yeah,
Okay, good.
I think I just was off. because we
It's
had
been a
special-
while.
We had a special safety meeting the week before, I think, too,
Yeah.
so. Thanks.
Renee, are we on?
I hope so.
But I mean, I'll double check.
Hi, Tom.
We good? Good. Okay. All right, before we get started, remember to speak slow and into the microphone. This is a committee meeting, Department, City Council. And the first committee up is Streets, Sidewalks, and Lighting, and Mr. Greer.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to bring the order street, sidewalk, and lighting. It is November 9th, 2020, 6 p.m. at the Active Adult Center. All members of the committee are present and other members of council and guests noted on my sheet. There is no request for legislation today. And for miscellaneous discussion, I'm just going to ask if there is an update on the sewer project for Fifth Street.
Oh, for Lincoln Avenue where they're working right now? Yeah, so they're off of the two main roads. They're off of Fifth Street, they're off of North Van Buren. They're working up Lincoln Avenue right now. They're moving along a little bit behind schedule, but they're prepared to have this thing done here soon. But they hit some elevation issues with existing utilities in the area, and there's always complications with these jobs. But as of right now, everything is moving forward.
And these are new elevation challenges past the one that was on Fifth Street, or?
Yeah, I mean, if you're running a 36-inch pipe up the street where there's, sewer laterals, gas services, water services, everything's got to, you have to try to fit in between everything. So there's just a lot of stuff to consider when you're running up through there.
I had a few residents reach out. It's like clockwork. Right to the minute they start up and move.
Good.
So, I don't have anything else. Is there any miscellaneous, Mrs. Angela?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Greer. I've been the one that asked Mr. Tracy about Fifth Street paving. I know you said that the asphalt has to be above 60, and I think we've had a few days above 60, but it's still on hold for next year.
Yeah, it'll still be on hold for next year. Obviously, ODOT, when they see the temperatures like that, they're going to go and move on other projects. We wouldn't want to rush it, even though the last 5 days have been beautiful. I'm sure they scheduled other things in place of that. So the whole process itself, as you could have seen on like Van Buren and Waterloo, they'll do the milling and they'll leave and go do some other things and come back and do the paving, and that doesn't go right, or a plant shuts down, they won't get it all done in time. So it probably would have been a week or two process. So the window has to be for that entire period.
I was just hoping that maybe one of the ODOT projects got paid, faster and sooner than they thought, and they can come and do ours.
So, we all want it to get done as fast as possible. And I mean, we're all in agreement with that. But I'm pleased to not do it too late in the year. I think we're going to get a better product by doing it in the spring. We do it now and maybe it doesn't have a chance to cure long enough and we have some issues, or, the stormwater project is not complete yet. So if they were to go pave it, the water is going to come up through the storm sewers for now until it's all connected. So that water could end up under the road. It really wouldn't have, it would have been okay, but we're going to get a better product in the spring.
Right.
Especially because in town next spring, we're going to have, they were going to pave the other portion of Worcester Road, of 619, which is Worcester Road North, from State Street to the highway. next year. That's all part of one project with the Fifth Street portion. But now those will get done at the same time. So you'll have continuous new road on 619 through Barberton. And also we have 3 AMATS projects going next year. So AMATS projects alone, there's a lot going on next year. We're going to have Worcester Road North between Birch Street and Norton Avenue. And then Norton Avenue from Worcester Road North to 4th Street. And then also 2nd Street Southwest. So there's going to be a lot going on and a lot of new streets next year on our main roads as well.
I just want to make a comment too, that State Street Bridge is looking really nice.
Yeah,
You know,
with the repainting.
Yeah, repainting it, sandblasting, repainting it, looks really, really nice.
Actually, to tap on how you brought up, thought about a question. When I was coming through that area, I noticed that the intersection is concrete, but the streets are asphalt. That intersection has pretty big gaps in it.
Yes.
When they redo that road, would they be doing the intersection as well, or would they be skipping kind of that square?
So we have another AMATS project that we were awarded a year or 2 ago probably, and that is the Worcester State project that is scheduled for 2022. And that is the replacement of all the concrete at the intersection of State and Worcester Road, and Worcester Road right there.
Okay.
So we're in discussions right now whether it should go back concrete or go back in asphalt, given all the new materials they have these days. And there's a lot of variables to look at. The MOT for concrete is much more expensive than it is for asphalt. But you have longevity issues. There's lots of things to consider when you go to look at those types of things. So maybe something to look at in the future.
Thanks, Mr. President. Are there any other questions from the committee? Any questions from council? Any questions from, yes? Hearing none. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to.
Motion made by Mrs. Angela. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Seconded by Mrs. Fry. We are now adjourned at 6:07 PM.
Next up is Environmental Health and Social Services, Mr. Gay.
Thank you, Mr. President. Environmental Health and Social Services. Today is November 9th, 2020. Time is 6:08. I'm meeting at Active Adult Center. Members present noted, council members present noted also. Any guests? No new request for legislation. And open up for Ms. Knight's discussion. Mrs. Fry?
Thank you. We've been discussing many times in council about the health report that we used to get from Summit County. And about a week and a half ago, I called and left a message telling them that we were looking for some facts and figures about COVID and drug overdoses and their inspections of restaurants and so on and so forth. And I got a call back from our new sanitarian, and his name is Brett Rollins. And we had a discussion, and Mr. Ricks used to be our representative. However, you know, with COVID and everything, he's not been meeting with them. But Brent is going to put together a report that will entail the things that I mentioned, the COVID cases, the inspections of restaurants, dog bites, cat bites, drug overdoses, all those things. And he is going to email it to the mayor, and it will be posted on the city website.
I appreciate it. Thank you. You said Mr. Brent Brown?
Brent Rollins.
Thank you. Anybody else?
I have just a follow-up question. Mrs. Fry, did Brent provide an email address to you if he had concerns or a direct number?
I have a direct number.
I can get to you whenever.
Okay, yeah, I have a direct number.
Anybody else? All right, hearing none, motion to adjourn, please.
I'll second that.
And Mr. Heidi. And we are adjourned at 6:10. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Next up, we have, planning, annexation, and codes, Mrs. Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Planning, Annexation, and Codes is meeting today, right now at 6:11 PM at the Active Adult Center. All members are present, along with all council and guests as noted. We have one piece of legislation to request. It's a draft resolution titled Zoning Permit Moratorium, imposing a moratorium of no longer than 1 year on the issuing of zoning permits for entertainment device arcades, used car lots, mini warehouse, limited indoor storage, and dollar stores. On October 21st, the Planning Commission meeting unanimously passed this to send on to City Council. This moratorium request comes from the planning staff, has been asked to review the text and the fees associated with the various types of businesses. The request also came from city staff, mayor, judge, and by a few of the city council members. The moratorium would allow proper time to review Barberton's codified ordinances, along with chapter 1130, allowable uses in the city development code. This moratorium will work in conjunction with the overall review of the Barberton Development Code and city neighborhoods. We're asking emergency wording to facilitate timelessness in the daily operations of the planning department and to take effect immediately. Currently, we have 2 outstanding permits. They will not be affected by this. They'll go forward with their permits and whatnot. So I will open it up to any of the members of my committee. Has any questions? Mr. Greer?
Thank you. This morning I met with Mr. Hunt and I was asking more details. I was at that planning commission meeting. So I was kind of following, it was kind of hard for me to hear, but he was very insightful with the reasoning, why he wanted this, why, for the length of it. And I was just hoping that maybe Mr. Hunt can explain to council the reasoning for the length and why it was needed. I do know that there's measures in this. When I went to him, I had a couple concerns. One being the length of time that we are restricting that type of business in the city of Barberton. I don't call it bad timing, bad optics, or whatever it is. It doesn't, to me, I've had people kind of like, not really, this wasn't really public until yet, but it just doesn't look good. But there's a reason for it,
Right.
is what I'm getting at. So I was hoping that council could get a better explanation on what this is going to accomplish, help accomplish, why we need a year and not 6 months, why can't we use our internal ways to stop business?
Well, I was
That's what we're
going
hoping to
to
accomplish.
get your questions and then I was gonna let Mr. Hunt take this.
Okay, awesome.
So,
Thank you.
Mr. Nugent, do you have any questions? No? Okay, Joyce? No. Okay, Mr. Trevor?
Sure, yeah.
Mr. Hunt, if you wouldn't come forward and explain this to us.
Yeah, thank
Now, it
you.
did say, no longer than 1 year, so it could get done in 6 months, it could be done in 10 months. So it says not any more than 1 year.
So, yeah, since coming on about 5 months ago, I've kind of been observing how the development code has been working and the types and requests of uses that we, the city, have been receiving. And apart from several residential developments, Christian Healthcare Ministries, we've had a slew of these types of uses, mostly phone calls, but also several applications for these types of uses. And asked the larger question, maybe, should we take a step back and kind of regroup around where these uses located? Not to say that these are bad uses, but there's a reason why all these uses are coming to us at the current time. And I think it's it's prudent of planning staff and planning commission to take a look at where we can locate these uses in the future in the bigger picture of zoning in our city. And one thing I think council was made aware of, that we applied at the state level for a grant for our development code, and we're hopeful to receive that grant. Now, whether we receive that grant and act on it within the 12 months is yet to be determined. We're still awaiting that feedback from State of Ohio, Jobs Ohio on that grant. But that might play a role in how quickly we're able to address. I know this sunsets after a year, so certainly, but if we, rather than take a Band-Aid approach and look at this holistically and how this fits into our development code, I think that's the longer term goal of looking at these uses as well as other land uses in our city. We have 21 development land use classifications, which is a lot by any city, you know. That's a lot to tackle, a lot to take on. So we kind of want to analyze why we have so many land use designations, and then kind of how do these uses fit into the bigger picture of things, and does it benefit us to come up with a larger strategy of where these uses can locate. Also look at other cities, how they're handling these uses. You know, what parameters do other places have on similar types of uses. So if you have any other questions, I welcome those, but that's the update from my end. Thank you.
Well, and just to, you know, go forward, what he said and what the planning commission member said is that, you know, it's hard to, as you're trying to redo or revisit the development code, and then you have all these applications coming in, there has to be a time where that has to stop so they can continue and group all this together, because it'd be very hard if you have 3 or 4 applications and you're trying to look at this and trying to look at that. This kind of stops it, so the office can then really take that whole picture of development code and zoning and take it from there. And I think this is something that the development code, we can all agree that it needs to be updated. And we need to get into this century and figure out exactly what we're going to do and go forward with our future plans in the city. So I don't think this is anything so unusual to ask for a moratorium. I just think this is what you need to do to stop this and then go forward with the development code and the zoning. That's my opinion on that. Anybody else? Mr. Greer?
I just have just a little bit more. In talking with Mr. Hunt this morning, he did mention, just so everybody is aware, kind of, it was a little not helpful to me, but he mentioned that other cities do use this as well, the same, like a stop measure that we have used and we're just pulling out of our back pocket to try to use.
Right.
That this has been used, or that he's aware of or been part of.
Well, it makes sense.
And so this is used by other municipalities. I just want to lay in on the emergency wording for this. I'm fine with emergency wording, but I would like it to go readings. That's my opinion on this, because ultimately it's stopping business from those type of businesses from coming to Barberton.
And your reason for the 3 readings
Well, we
is to
should go
have
three
businesses
readings
still
anyways.
coming in, getting permits and everything, right?
Because, well, that's how it should be. And I would like it to go 3 readings to have time to have public input on these.
I second Mr.
I'm completely fine with the emergency wording, but that's just my opinion. I would rather have it go. I like it, but I'd rather have input from the public on this.
Mrs. Coleman?
If we're putting emergency wording on it for it to be in effect sooner so they can work on it, what is the 3 readings about?
Public input, emergency wording is just so it goes into effect after we vote immediately. Is this something that, well, I guess another question would be, Mr. Hunt, are we planning on doing this with our own resources, or is this something that we would be using grant money?
So it would probably be a combination of both. Hopefully we get the whole aspect of the grant money that we've inquired about. But we'll have to go out and solicit RFPs or RFQs to make sure. We'll be bringing out a consultant for the bigger strategy here, but there's also some work that planning department staff can handle as well in the meantime.
Well, it's kind of hard to put a stop to these permits if we don't, I mean, you could get 10 or 15 of them pending in the 3 readings that we're going to have. And the whole thing is that unfortunately, we have to put a stop so we can put a start. It just has to be stopped so we can put a start.
I understand that point. My personal.
It's not that we're
belief is
turning any
that
business away, please, don't put this on social media, we're turning business away. This is not what this is. The development code, Mr. Hunt can tell you where he's updating that, bring it up to, we have the CIC now that we can bring this forward. We can look at what we have and we can go forward with some new zoning, perhaps, new development code. That's what this is for. This is not to say, no, we don't want you in our town. That's not what this is for. You need to stop you need to put a stop to that, permits for these particular businesses so we can go forth, so we can go on.
Just for a short period of
If
time.
they're asking, we could always go back to them and say, if somebody wanted to apply and we said no, maybe they can take that on record. And when we get the development code done, we get this moratorium, released, then we could go back to them and say, you have to have a stop so you can get started. That's the only thing. And, and it could be, we can have a flood of permits coming in. And so the girls are trying to work on those permits, and then we're trying to do this, trying to put a stop on this moratorium. They're always open. I mean, even if the moratorium is 6 months, then they can come back. Or maybe if they, like I said, fill out an application and permit, we can go back to them and say, these are our new developments. Yes, Mrs. Cole.
The 3 readings that you want are for input from the public. I get the 3 readings for input, but how do we stop the people from running in and putting in 60 applications for these kind of businesses? That's what we're asking is how, if we do 3 readings, how do we stop them from putting in 60 apps?
That's a fair point. I would counter that with then maybe a 6 month. And then if they need more time, then they ask for more time, rather than allowing a full year.
Less than 1 year.
Up
Less than
to
1
a
year.
full year.
It says no longer than 1 year. So we don't know,
Right, I understand the point, but that's just where I stand with that.
Mrs. Debbie?
I would just be curious, Mr. Hunt, how many of these applications have we received this year?
I would say that we have received, well, there's one arcade game, still game arcades that we have right now, I believe, and then there's also a used car lot. And then we probably received 2 or 3 more in addition to that, but we've received a number of phone calls from interested parties. I ballpark it in the 10 to 12 range, additional phone calls.
Is that usual phone call traffic?
So there's particular interest in those uses, that's why we identified them.
Those what?
There's some,
Users.
yeah,
The reason that I'm asking is, if we've received 5 this year, I think it's unrealistic in the course of 3 readings to expect 15 or 20 more applications. I'm not saying it's not possible, I'm just saying it's unrealistic given the statistics that Mr. Hunt just gave us. I also would like to see it go 3 readings, and I agree with Mr. Greer in the fact that the emergency warning is okay, because the 3 readings has allowed any input from the public that we may need, and then it can be signed immediately. Because once it's passed, it's passed, so, that's my opinion, and that's why I was curious about the figures, because, obviously, if it was some crazy number of permits, I would say, then we need to act immediately, but it doesn't seem as if that's the case.
Thank you. Mr. Heidi?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Hunt, regarding these 5 permits, in the coming weeks and coming months, will there be another list of things that we want to put a halt to while we revisit, or is this kind of the first step for a little while?
These would be all the uses. I don't think there'll be another ask, no.
I'm just looking to see legislation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's right. All that I want to ask is if we go 3 readings, what is the process about somebody coming with one of those uses? I mean, how much paperwork do we have to do? And how much research and, everything that is, part of, going forward with those businesses, how much time, energy, paperwork, and what have you would be expended between now and 3 readings? Say we got 5 new applications that are for businesses that the moratorium says that we're not going to look into at this particular time. How much work does that add to your office?
I would say each application, I'm again ballparking this, but it's probably roughly 2 hours just of dedicated work time to do the report, do all the postings, do the public notice. So 2 full days, 16 hours approximately of staff time dedicated to that.
For each
For each
application?
application.
And then if the moratorium goes through and they have already applied and gone through the process, what do we do at that point?
So those that get in before the moratorium is actually introduced, they'd be eligible to come. A lot of these are conditional uses, so they would have to come to planning commission. Not all of them are conditional uses. I think dollar stores don't need that approval. But the storage, the warehousing, the car lots, and the device arcades are conditional uses.
Thank you.
Mr. Hedges?
When is the next planning commission meeting?
There'll be one here a week from Wednesday, the 18th. Yeah.
So they would have to get that in first, before that meeting. Then the next one would be in December.
That's correct. Yeah.
And if we went 3 readings, that would be December 8th. They wouldn't make that cut then. But at the planning.
If they
If they apply ahead of time,
if they didn't get in next week, if they got in by December 8th, I guess we could hear them at the first planning commission meeting in January.
Mr. Mayor? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Thank you, Angela. The problem is with businesses, they're gonna come to town and we're gonna put them on hold. 9 out of 10 times they're gonna leave, they won't come back to Barberton. So I think we give them 3 readings, give them a chance to come to Barberton. That way, if they still wanna come to Barberton, those 3 readings, we give them a chance till December. Because if we tell them we're gonna put a hold on for up to a year, they'll go to a different city. We would lose out on that business. So if we give them the 3 readings, just give them a chance. You can never say we tried to come to Barberton, but we were pushed out.
Well, like I explained, a moratorium is not pushing business away, it's just putting a stop to it so we can get caught up with the
Correct.
development code. This is right.
Mr. Hunt just brought up about January 8th. Well, the moratorium won't have been passed by that particular time. So if somebody put in an application, it wouldn't go forward, right?
Right.
So it's kind of futile, some of the things that we're talking about. And I think if you look at what the moratorium is saying, is that the businesses that have the moratorium on them are not what am I gonna say, not businesses that, would make a huge difference in the city as far as income tax and, the things that we need for the businesses going forward. And since we are landlocked, I think that some of these, businesses that want to come to town, the land would be better used for other uses.
That's absurd.
Mr.
And
Hyde,
why is it
If-
absurd?
If I,
excuse me, Mr. Hyde, you have the floor.
thank you, Chair. With these businesses, we already do have existing codes, and if we were to suspend on one reading, that would essentially give these people a 1 week notice to apply. And as somebody who runs a restaurant, I got a 3-hour notice that I had to close my restaurant due to COVID. I know that's not 100% related, but that's not really fair to a business that may next week say, I think I might want to look at Barberton on Tuesday. And they basically had a week's notice. I don't think that's a fair thing to a potential business owner to shut them in essentially 7 days. It shuts them out of the whole process that we have existing codes for. I don't see that as a positive, because if you look at certain things like I'm gonna use for example, the entertainment device arcades. Well, they're conditional use, they can only go in certain places, and as we've seen for the past year, there's been significant pushback from residents in those places anyway. So that one, I don't fear we'd have any problem with. The other ones, due to space, due to time and whatnot that would take to get these things up and running and built, I just don't think it's fair to a potential business for us to say tonight, we're gonna call for it next week and then ultimately pass it, because I do support this, but a 1 week notice to a potential business who has no idea what we're talking about right now. Somebody in Cleveland might wanna look at Barberton for a used car lot, say, and Tuesday say, let's go down there and move on. Well, when did this happen? And they said, I'm only saying this from the vantage point of a business that got closed like that. This essentially shuts the door in 1 week. So you can take that with what it is. It's just kind of a different way of thinking when I look at this. So, thank you.
Ms. Miller?
All of these points are valid, of course, but I just really wanted to go back to Mr. Greer's point, which is the purpose of readings is for the public, for the citizens to give input. So I would just encourage council to think about what he's saying, right? So maybe you have one reading and see what the feedback is. I think that Mr. Greer has said that. Let's see if there is any, and then, maybe you guys can evaluate it then. But
Okay, we will have 3 readings. We will have 3 readings. Okay? Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out that I do understand your point, and I don't want it to be the idea of this pushing business away, because I do understand why. That my point was just 3 readings for public input. I do agree with this.
All right, I understand. I've been through this before, and I understand what, where everybody's coming from, and we'll go 3 readings on that. And, like I said, right now there's 2 outstanding. One is awesome.
I think that I like Lisa's thoughts that we go 1 reading and
One
see
reading
what
and
we
see what
have,
comes up.
feedback.
I think that's a very fair point
I
there.
think that is a compromise.
Yeah,
Yeah.
1 reading, and let's see what the feedback is, and
See if his office has got,
Especially given the timing of the planning commission meeting. So
yeah.
okay.
1 reading, and if we deem that there's no feedback or there's only positive feedback for this, then we will move on.
Oh, is that okay?
That's perfect. 1 reading's perfect. We'll
So
go from
I
there.
make a motion that we call for this with 1 reading?
no, I think.
No, I don't think it
That's
has to.
like not what I said. I said, why don't you call for 3 readings? You don't have to.
We don't have to have 3
You
readings.
don't have to have 3 readings.
That's why.
I think that what I was just trying to say is just to offer you guys an alternative. You can call, but you
Right.
don't have to go 3, and you guys can gauge as a body what
Right.
you want to do after you moving forward.
Okay,
Because I've done
thank you for
legislation
clarification.
2 readings.
Right.
Before.
And
So.
that gives
Yeah,
potential
there's more time.
businesses a little more
I-
time to
I don't
evaluate
have a
this.
problem with that. You know, we can set that up for 3 readings, and if it comes down to 1 or 2 readings, everybody agrees on that. You know, this is really a big deal because, you know, we have Mr. Hunt here that's really looking in and talking to different communities and getting their ideas and whatnot. So, yes, we're very lucky to have him. So,
I'll make a motion to call for it.
Joyce makes the first motion,
No, second.
Mr. Greer, second motion, all in favor? Aye.
I didn't hear.
He says, okay, all right, miscellaneous discussion, well, I just wanted to say this before, the design review board that's scheduled for tomorrow has been canceled, lack of agenda. Mr. Trevor, has been working on city maps, and he would like the input of council. I don't know how many of them remember different sections of town, north end, west side, Columbia Lake. You know, this town had names for different sections. And I think at one time we had 22. It's hard to market the town when you have all of these. So the planning commission, we've been kind of condensing them on their feedback on eliminating some of these smaller little sections of town that Palmer, there's Broadview Heights or something like that. You know, able to geographically have that so they could see when you say it's the west side, you know, they can look and they can see what's on the west side. So we're combining them, and I think presently we have 16. So Mr. Hunt has the city maps, and he's going to be passing them out and talking to you a little about that, and the input. We could talk with his planning, or you can call his office.
Yeah.
Do you want to?
Yeah, you walk her through.
Yeah, he'll walk us through this.
Thank you.
Oh, we got big ones this time.
Thank you.
You gave me a smile.
What's that?
You gave me a smile.
I did that from before.
Yeah.
Yes.
There, and then you got it.
That one's, so there's one that's award, and there's one that's just the name, just award. Ward council can see there.
Oh, okay, yours. Do you have a ward map, or do you need the?
Small.
Oh, yeah, I can give you that too. I don't know where that is. That's what you need, right?
Joyce and I need one of those too, and Carol maybe did. Carol, did you get the?
Sorry for.
No, I didn't. Oh, wait a minute, Trevor.
I gave her mine.
Should have helped you back, okay.
All right. You get your steps into this.
Do you want me to put that from over here?
Oh, I don't care, you can stand up there.
Okay. So the idea here is, like Nina alluded to, like Councilwoman Angela alluded to, We want to build a neighborhood focus, right, in our community. So the map that you see before you identifying the 16 neighborhoods, these have a historical basis. We didn't pull these names out today. Justin Halter, who's with the city and planning department, we did some research. We worked with Sarah Hayes from the Barberton Library, and we found a historic class in town, and we shared this information with the planning commission. I think we presented 18 potential neighborhoods to the planning commission. And like Councilwoman Andrew mentioned, a couple of them really didn't resonate, or there wasn't really much of an account of these neighborhoods, so we combined two of the neighborhoods, I believe, and that resulted in the map that you see in front of you today. So we wanted to share this all for your input. Really, we want neighborhoods that resonate with the citizens. Some citizens might be new to these areas, so they may not have known a historical basis. Maybe there's a different name we should consider, but we tended to be kind of most across the board with the most common names that were either on the class or maybe had already input from existing residents in these communities. This is in part to build neighborhood pride, to make the citizens of Barberton aware of what neighborhoods they reside in. And then also, I think this will help with a planning process that we're starting to look at. Mayor Judge mentioned that we're responding to requests about vacant land, and we didn't want a scattered approach, but a more in-depth approach that kind of took into account the kind of the housing market and the housing typology in these neighborhoods. So that's something that the planning department is studying right now. So it is our hope within the next, couple months to come up with a whole strategy behind vacant land that kind of ties into this neighborhood objective. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have and go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Hunt. This is just a general question. When looking at our tax record for properties on Summit County Auditor's website, it says the neighborhood that it already is on the lot description.
Yeah.
Would that change to then be this? Is this like an official thing we're gonna?
So how that occurred is, from working at a county previously, when a lot was originally platted and subdivided, there's probably, to answer your question, no, not all the time will it align, because we have far more plats in the city than 16 neighborhoods that are accounted for. Sometimes they will coincide, but if you look at the historical planning of the areas, there was a lot of land speculators that subdivided land and then ultimately sold their housing development on those lands. And that's what the county shows on the tax records, is the original allotment that was filed with the county.
And those are plots, these are neighborhoods.
But these names generally they're tied to those plats and when the development occurred. And that's the other thing, if you look at a map of when, the construction took place on these individual lots, a lot of them, there's a pattern for most of these neighborhoods. A lot of these neighborhoods were developed roughly at the same point in time. And I have that map. That map was actually produced in our 2005, 2006 master plan. So I can share that information with you as well. Those roughly align. They're not the same as the neighborhoods, but at least give you a general idea of the pattern of development in the city.
Excuse me, Mr. Hunt, this discussion came up this summer with some of my neighbors in my area. And some of the older ones, they really don't like the idea of South Barberton. To me, it's okay with me. But some of the old ones, they like Snydertown. They want it to be, they wanted it to be Snydertown. And they would say, this is Snydertown. This is not South Barberton or whatever, And I would talk to them about that, but I know a lot of the newer people who moved in probably don't really care, but I know some of the older ones, my generation, they like that neighborhood name. And they want to keep it, but.
And Mr. Griffin, they probably will continue calling that.
Yes, they will, yes. Oh, they will, yes, they will.
When you're looking at the geographics, it's easier, you know, at least we have a west side, the east side, a north end, not a
And a
north
south,
side, but north end, and a south side.
That's all.
You know, we kind of want to market that at the south side.
Right, right.
With my husband and his family,
Yeah, you know,
been in Snyder Town for many, many years. It's hard for us not to call it that, you know?
right.
But the newer generation coming in and whatnot, we want to just kind of, you know, have it not that way.
Yeah, I can understand it, you know, change always, you know, west, east, northwest, east, and south, you know. I
Right,
understand.
right.
But, you know,
So, if I may, anybody that has any questions, they can email Mr. Hunt, they can call him, on their, maybe their recommendation or what, you know, making any changes. We went through this map several different times, and, being in Barberton my whole entire life, there was some areas I wasn't even familiar with, I never even heard that before. And, so it was kind of like, really, you know, but most of them I know where they're at, but, there was a couple new ones in there, so, if anybody would like to talk to Mr. Hunt, email him, and, he will make the time, for you.
Yeah, and if there's ground sediment that, you know, maybe a neighborhood change, or name needs to be looked at or reanalyzed, that's a conversation we're open to.
Yes.
There, like I said, there is logic or there is historical evidence as to why they're named as they appear on the map today, but, there might be even a small boundary dispute between neighborhoods. We can talk about this. So this is just more or less a framework, wanted to put this in front of you, so you have an idea that we're looking at this neighborhood-based planning approach. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hunt. Okay, but since we spent so much time, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Greer, second.
I'll second it.
Mrs. Coburn, and we are adjourned at, what's it, 6:50 p.m.
Okay, next we have a special meeting of city properties, parks, and recreation.
Thank you, Mr. President. Call to order a special meeting of City Properties, Parks, and Recreation. It is Monday, November 9th, 2020 at 6:47. We are in the Active Adult Center. All members present, all council members present, guests noted. We have one request for legislation, draft ordinance titled Transfer of Property Christian Healthcare Ministries Incorporated. An ordinance authorizing the city of Barberton to convey parcel number 0101927 to Christian Healthcare Ministries by quitclaim deed with retention by the city of Barberton of a permanent easement enclosing the Memorial Cemetery and declaring an emergency. We've been moving forward on this property to the church there. We've already approved quite a bit to make this happen. Director Miller, do you have any comments on this?
No, if you can recall, you approved a memorandum of understanding, and this is just one of the, probably many steps in that memorandum of understanding. This is kind of the final step.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the committee about this?
None.
Any from the body? Do I have a motion to call for it?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second that, sir.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn for the special meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Thank you. We are adjourned at 6:49.
Okay, we have another special meeting with city utilities.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is November 9th. It's a special city utilities. We're in the active adult center. All members are present, along with those noted on my sheet. We have a request for legislation, a draft ordinance titled Mitigation Assistance Designee for Arthur Street, designating city of Barberton agents for the administration of the city's mitigation assistance acquisition demolition project funded under the Hazardous Mitigation Grant Program, HMGP. This is very similar to what we did for 14th Street a while back. Do you have anything to add for us, Mr. Tracy?
No, not unless there's any questions.
Anybody have any questions pertaining?
I read, that it was 3 houses, but there's 4. Yeah, there's 4 on Arthur, and I was just curious.
Only 3 qualify, I believe, in the
Only
floodplain.
3 qualified. Okay, so,
That's criteria set by FEMA.
right, I understand that, but I went to count the houses, but there's 4 instead of 3, so I just, okay. Which one, didn't comply? Do you remember?
It's either the one on the very end or the one at the beginning, I can't remember.
One of the 3.
One of the 3, huh? That's the, I think I could have figured out one.
If I had the floodplain map in front of me, I could look at it, but that would tell you which one.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have a motion to call for this?
I'll make a motion to call for it.
I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Our second draft ordinance is titled Mitigation Assistance Designee 15th Street Northwest, designating city of Barberton agents for the administration of the city's mitigation assistance acquisition demolition project funded under the Hazardous Mitigation Grant Program, HMGP. This again is the same program that we did for 14th, only it's for 15th Street. Do you have any questions on that? Do we have a motion to call for this?
I'll make a motion.
I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. The third is titled Appropriation Water Fund, appropriating $10,583.30 from the unappropriated item of the water fund to the capital budget of the water fund, and we will be referring this to finance. This is, we need to do this for, proper operations of the water department.
I just have a question. I was just wondering if, this money is appropriated because we have spent more than we had budgeted for,
No, so what this is, if you remember, would have been probably 3 or 4 months ago, the distribution and collection garage got a grant from the BWC for a new trenching and shoring box, an 8-foot trenching and shoring box. This is the grant money that we're getting reimbursed for. I think it was right around 13,000. We had to pay 10 or right around 10,000 of whatever's in there. And this is our reimbursement for that. So wait, I misspoke. We had to end up paying, our match was 20%, so 2,000 and some change. And that's our reimbursement for that.
I'll make a motion to call for this.
And I will second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's all we have for the special meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will second it.
We are adjourned at 4.
Okay, last but not least is finance and personnel, Mrs. Fry.
Thank you, Mr. President. Took a minute there to get that going. It is Monday, November 9th, 2020. We are in the Active Adult Center. The time is 6:57, and we are beginning the meeting for finance and personnel. We have quite a few pieces of legislation to get through tonight, and if we have time, we also have the finance report. The first piece of legislation is a draft ordinance titled Authorized Payment, Browse McDowell, authorizing the Director of Finance to pay 2 separate invoices to Browse McDowell in the amounts of $4,725 and $4,900. That is a total of $9,625 that will be paid to Browse McDowell. This is for the legal work associated with the Community Improvement Corporation. And the invoice was received prior to the purchase order being established, and therefore we have to have an ordinance for that, to pay that amount. Does anyone have any questions? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this?
Motion.
Motion made by Mrs. DeBevick and seconded by Mr. Medges. The second piece of legislation. Okay, oh, sorry. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, it passes unanimously. Okay, the second piece of legislation is a draft ordinance titled Appropriation Local Coronavirus Relief Fund, appropriating $3,328 from the unappropriated item of the local coronavirus relief fund to the operation and maintenance budget of the local coronavirus relief fund. And that particular amount of money is for PPE for the fire department. This draft ordinance is also for $18,156 from the unappropriated item of the local coronavirus relief fund to the capital budget of the local coronavirus relief fund. That amount, the $18,156, is for police to replace laptops for their cruisers and also to provide modems for the police cars to replace the hotspots that they're using now. This will give them continuous Wi-Fi. The last part of this appropriation is in the amount of $909,251.67 from the unappropriated item of the local coronavirus relief fund to the personnel service budget of the local coronavirus relief fund. This particular piece, piece of this ordinance, the $909,000, is for payroll for the fire department. Do I have any questions about this piece of legislation? Okay, do I have a motion to call for this?
I make the motion. I will second it.
Motion made by Mrs. Angelou and seconded by Mrs. DeBevick. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. That passes unanimously. The third piece of legislation is a draft ordinance titled Appropriation COVID-19 PSGP Fund. This is to appropriate $500,000 from the unappropriated item of the Summit County COVID-19 PSGP Fund to the personal service of the Summit County COVID-19 PSGP Fund. This is money that we received from Summit County, and this is for the police department. Does anybody have any questions about that? Do I have a motion to call for that, this piece of legislation?
I'll make a motion.
Okay. Motion made by Mrs. DeBevick and seconded by Mr. Medges. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. That passes unanimously as well. All right, the fourth piece of legislation is a draft ordinance titled Summit Akron Solid Waste Management Authority Solid Waste Management Plan. This is to adopt the Summit County Solid Waste Management Plan by the Summit Akron Solid Waste Management Authority, doing business as Reworks for the city of Barberton. All of you should have received, or it's on your legislation, a summary, executive summary for Reworks. Does anybody have any questions about the solid waste program? No? Hearing none, do I have a motion to call for this?
I will make the motion.
Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff, seconded by Mr. Medges. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that also passes. The fifth piece of legislation that we have is a draft ordinance titled Disposal of Miscellaneous Items, authorizing the city of Barberton to dispose of miscellaneous items in the municipal building or to sell these items on gov deals, including but not limited to chairs, file cabinets, old printers, etc., which are no longer in use. Does anyone have any questions about this piece of legislation? No? All right. Do I have a motion to call for it? Mr. Medges made a motion to call for it. Oh, and Mrs. Angelo seconded that motion. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The sixth piece of legislation that we have in finance tonight is a draft ordinance titled Commendation Barberton City Schools, commending and showing appreciation to the Barberton City School District, including the Barberton Board of Education, administrators, faculty, and students for working through the challenges associated with the current COVID-19 pandemic. Does anyone have any questions about that? No. Do I have a motion to call for this? Mrs. Angela?
I'll second it.
And seconded by Mrs. DeBevick. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the seventh piece of legislation is a draft ordinance, and it is an It is an appropriation for the water fund, and this is appropriating $10,583.30 from the unappropriated item of the water fund to the capital budget of the water fund. This was referred to us from utilities. Anyone have any questions?
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Mrs. DeBevick made a motion to call for this. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mrs. Angeloff. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Then we have, a late request for legislation. Therefore, we will have to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 302. And this particular piece of legislation is to enter into contract with Medical Mutual. Do I have a motion to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 302?
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Mrs. Angeloff, seconded by Mr. Medges. Okay, this is a draft ordinance titled I'm sorry. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Okay, thanks for catching me. This is a draft ordinance titled Enter into Contract Medical Mutual. authorizing the mayor to enter into a one-year contract with Medical Mutual of Ohio through a partnership with Summit County Health Connection for employee benefits, which include medical, prescription, dental, and vision coverage, beginning January 1st, 2020. In the letter that I received from Mrs. Doherty, she explained that the premiums are the same as they were in 2020. Do I have any questions concerning this piece of legislation? Mrs. Campbell?
I don't have a question, I just wanted to know, as we did this past year, is that like one check for the whole year that will be sent to, Summit County for the health?
No,
It's, I believe it's factored, you have this, Jeremy?
Jeremy's there, huh?
yeah,
I believe it's factored into the monthly payment, but I'm not positive.
Correct.
So it's a monthly.
yeah,
Oh, so
it's a
gonna be
monthly payment.
Okay, very good.
And I didn't make it clear in the letter, but, the benefits are exactly the same as well. None of the benefits changed, and neither did the, cost of the premium.
Wow. Okay, thank you, Beth. And also, this is through the Summit County Health Connection.
Yes, and that's and with that partnership, we've been able to save, and I don't have statistics with me, but we saved money on prescriptions this past year, actually the last 2 years, as well as medical.
Thank you.
It's been good that we, been since we've done this.
Always good to save money. Do I have a motion to call for this, or did you have a question?
I'll make a
Motion made by Mrs. Angela, seconded by Mr. Medges. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we got through that faster than I imagined. So therefore, if Jeremy would, be so kind as to give us the, go over the, budget report for October, we would appreciate that.
All right, starting off with the health insurance fund. The revenues for the month of October were about $398,000. Expenditures, $391,000. That put a net of about $7,000 to the positive for that fund. You will see the unexpended fund balance is up to about $929,000. Moving on to the city income tax analysis. First off, there is a typo. September is listed twice. That 2nd September is supposed to be the month of October. The estimate for the month of October was $898,000. The actuals came in at $1,024,000. For the year to date, we are under our estimate by about $3,000. And this past month, we transferred $1 million to the general fund. And we have $1.5 million left to transfer to the general fund this year. So roughly $750,000 for the next 2 months to fulfill our transfer to the general fund. Going back to the actual for the month of being a little over $1 million, a lot of that, as I stated last council report, had to deal with timing with CCA. So it's just the timing of when we're receiving these estimate payments and these advancements from them is what is throwing off. And that's why last month we only had an actual of $439,000. This month it's $1 million. I do know CCA did close out the month of September. About a week and a half ago, they closed out the month of September. So they are almost completely caught up, which is a good thing for us for actual information, and also a good thing with the upcoming conversion from CCA to RETA. So that's good that CCA is getting caught up now towards the end of the year for everything. Moving on to the statement of cash receipts and disbursements. There are a handful of accounts in the negative. The first one is the sports operating complex. That's in the negative due to the encumbrances outstanding. The next account in the negative is the FEMA fund, which is the fund that we're using for the 14th Street stormwater mitigation with FEMA. we have to put those expenses out first. FEMA will reimburse us, so we'll get reimbursed for that. The next fund in the negative is the CDBG fund, which is the HUD grant. And once again, another program where we have to pay for the expenses and they'll reimburse us for it. Moving on, the next fund in the negative is the Norton Sanitary Sewer Construction Fund. Like I stated previous months, that's deals with OWDA loans of all the Norton sewer projects that we have going on. Once we expend the money, we have to put that, or turn in the information to OWDA. They'll issue us money back for the money that we paid out. One thing I didn't want to bring to your attention, you'll notice the health insurance fund, Fund 660. I've been mentioning it's been in the negative all year round. It's finally in the positive again, because the encumbrance outstanding is going down. Why each month we're charging the healthcare to all the departments, so that's going into that fund. The encumbrance is coming down, which is starting to show that that's coming up. Well, it is in the positive now. The last 3 months of activity, you will notice the general fund is up. That is due to, in the month of October, us being able to have everything in order for the first payment that we received from Summit County for their payroll support grant program. We reclassified expenses that were paid in the general fund for police wages over to that. So that is what helped bring that unencumbered cash balance. Plus, we had a larger transfer this month. If you look, last month, we only transferred $475,000. This month, we transferred $1 million into the general fund. So those two things is what brought the unencumbered cash balance up. Moving on to the special revenue funds, that is up because in the month of October, we received another round of CARES Act funding, and that is why that's up by almost $1 million. The enterprise funds is down by about $200,000 from last month. That's just because the encumbrances outstanding are up from previous months. And then looking at the all other funds, you'll notice that is up by about $95,000. Moving on to comparing October 19 to October 20. You'll notice the unencumbered cash balance in the general fund is up. A lot of that has to deal with the CARES Act money this year and the Summit County local payroll support program. The special revenue funds are also up, and that too has to deal with the other round of CARES Act money we received in October, which is helping that be up some. Enterprise funds is down. Part of it has to deal with our encumbrances outstanding are up, plus our cash balance, plus the cash balance is just down as well by almost $1 million compared to last year at this time. And then all other funds, you'll notice the cash balance is down by about $600,000. The unencumbered shows it's down by about 1.5 million. Part of that is, as I stated many times, we have the encumbrance outstanding for the healthcare to Summit County for this year. So we have 2 more payments on that. We then can close out the PO, and the encumbrances outstanding will basically be gone. So, but you'll notice the cash balance, like I said, is down by about 600,000. We all know at the beginning of the year, we had a lot of retirements of a lot of, we had retirements in police department, fire department, street department, and all those employees were entitled to a severance. So our severance fund is a little bit down compared to last year at this time, and that's what's bringing down that cash balance in the all other funds. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Blaker. Does anyone have any questions for Jim? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to call for the October finance report?
I will make a motion.
Mrs. Angela made a motion to call for it. Mrs. Devitt seconded it. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And that passes. Is there any miscellaneous discussion for finance? Okay, hearing none, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion made by Mrs. Angela and seconded by Mrs. Devitt. And we are adjourned at 7:17 PM.
Okay, that concludes our committee meetings. We'll take a couple minutes break and do about 3 minutes. We'll start our committee of the whole meeting.
It'll be the last one of the years. We got yeah. Let's do it.
I know that,
Oh, yeah, that was fun. Those were great times. I had the video. Yeah. Played the Coliseum.
Yeah.
Yeah. I got a copy. Yeah. Oh, that was much fun. We'll have a drive to the, I know. We have a drive to the basket.
Yeah.
We look like swords. I know. Yeah. Yeah. They go, you
Yeah, so we have no idea.
well, I was so proud.
Right, and that's what I'm saying, is this is very long process.
Yeah.
And I think
I know, I mean,
We got a lot to do. We got a
nobody
lot
else
to
to
do.
be in.
Now, second.
You do. So, when I see you stay on that, just tell me.
Oh, yeah, well, even in some of the
I have no. Yeah, I know I'm not.
Well, I might sit down
Okay, I'll be around.
Right, yeah, I
So,
Yeah, I think it's a good idea. I expect
What do you got? Put it in the fund.
Right. One on the car. For the two more. I know. Yeah.
Okay, time to get started.
Because I noticed you were looking at it. Yeah. Is it? Is that? No. Forget what his name.
Okay, today is Monday, November 9th, 2020. This is Barberton Council Committee of the Whole meetings. I call this meeting to order at 7:25. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first up is citizens addressing council. Okay, we'll go right into our committee reports. And first off is Mrs. Angeloff with Planning, Annexations, and Codes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. Planning, Annexation, and Codes met this evening at 6:11. All members were present, along with council and other guests as noted on my sheet. We had one piece of legislation request. It's the draft ordinance titled zoning permit moratorium, imposing a moratorium of no longer than 1 year on the issuing of zoning permits for entertainment device arcades, used car lots, mini warehouse, limited indoor storage, and dollar store. At the present time, we do have two outstanding permits. One is for a used car lot, and the other one is for a storage unit. Mr. Hunt is in the process of observing our development code. He wants to take a step back so we can see what other communities are doing. There's many different uses of land uses. And so we passed this unanimous with 1 to 2 to 3 readings. Miscellaneous discussion, Mr. Hunt passed out city maps. This is the housing market. It's framework for what the planning department's gonna do. As they go out to these vacant lots, they can explain geographically where these lots are and what's the name of that neighborhood, that type thing. He would like council, any remarks, any concerns, any questions, you can email Mr. Hunt, the planning department, or you can call him and he will take the time to listen to you. And the design review board meeting that was scheduled for tomorrow is canceled, lack of agenda, and with that, I pass.
Thank you very much. Next up is Mr. Greer, Streets, Sidewalks, and Lighting.
Thank you, Mr. President. Street, sidewalk, and lighting met today, November 9th, 2020, at 6 p.m. here at the Active Adult Center. All committee members were present, as well as council, and guests noted on my sheet. There was no request for legislation. Miscellaneous discussion. Mr. Tracy gave a status update on the sewer project for Fifth Street, which it is on schedule still. Mrs. Angeloff asked about the Fifth Street repaving progress, and Mr. Tracy confirmed that the projects is scheduled for next year. With that, hopefully that project gets done with the rest of State Route 619 as well. I inquired about the concrete intersection, if that was part of the project. That is not, however, it is part of an additional project that we do have grant money for. There was nothing else, and we adjourned at 6:07 p.m. and with that, I pass.
Thank you. Next up is Mrs. Colburn, and City Utilities.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Utilities had a special meeting this evening in the Active Adult Center. All members were present and others as marked. We had 3 requests for legislation. The first was a draft ordinance titled Mitigation Assistance Designee for Arthur Street, designating City of Barberton agents for the administration of the city's mitigation assistance acquisition demolition project funded under the Hazardous Mitigation Grant Program. On Arthur Street, there are only 3 properties out of 4 that are meeting the criteria. The motion was carried and passed unanimously. The second is a draft ordinance titled Mitigation Assistance Designee for 15th Street Northwest, designating City of Barberton agents for the administration of the city's mitigation assistance acquisition demolition project funded under the Hazardous Mitigation Grant Program. This is for 15th Street and it was passed unanimously. The third is a draft ordinance titled Appropriation Water Fund, appropriating $10,583.30 from the unappropriated item of the water fund to the capital budget of the water fund. and this was referred to finance. That was passed, and with that, I pass.
Thank you. Next up is Mrs. DeBevick with Public Welfare and Safety.
Thank you, Mr. President. Public Welfare and Safety met on October 26th, 2020 in the Active Adult Center here. And we had one piece of legislation in which we voted on that evening. And we called for another piece of legislation. We received a letter from Mrs. Miller requesting legislation to approve the completed Barberton Code of Ordinances. This is an ordinance enacting a code of ordinances for the city of Barberton, revising, amending, restating, codifying, and compiling certain existing general ordinances of the political subdivision dealing with subjects embraced in such code of ordinances and declaring an emergency. So this is for us to enact this revision, if you will, an update that we agreed to and paid for, I think it was maybe last year. Yeah. So we are receiving that. So that we will be voting on that piece of legislation. We had no miscellaneous discussion, and with that, public welfare and safety will pass.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Griffin with Rules, Marketing, and Development.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rules, Marketing, and Development met October 26th in the Active Adult Center. All members were present and other guests as noted. We had no legislation to call for, but we did discuss a request for legislation on appointments. A motion was made to adjourn. We adjourned at 6:24 with that, I pass.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Jaber with Environmental Health and Social Services.
Thank you, Mr. President. Environmental Health and Social Services met November 9th at 6:08 at the Adult Center. Members present, other members also present noted. No new request legislation. We have miscellaneous discussion from Mr. Fry. She spoke to the gentleman in the Health Department, Center County, Brent Rollins. We will begin this information on a couple of topics we talked about before, and email the mayor. And we'll be getting emails for that, and we adjourn to 6:10, sir. Now I pass.
Thank you. Next up is Mr. Heidick with City Properties, Parks, and Recreation.
Thank you, Mr. President. City Properties, Parks, and Recreation met tonight, November 9th, 2020, at 6:47 PM in the Active Adult Center for a special meeting. All members were present, all council members and guests noted. We had one request for legislation, draft ordinance titled Transfer of Property, Christian Healthcare Ministries Incorporated, authorizing the city of Barberton to convey parcel number 0101927 to Christian Healthcare Ministries Incorporated by a quitclaim deed with retention by the city of Barberton of a permanent easement enclosing the Memorial Cemetery. This is almost the final step in the project of transferring the properties to Christian Healthcare Ministries at the old Portage Elementary or Middle School, whichever generation you're from there. And that was all we had. We adjourned at 6:49, and with that, we'll pass.
Thank you. Mrs. Fry, Finance and Personnel.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Finance and Personnel Committee met tonight at 6:57 PM. We had 8 pieces of legislation on the agenda for tonight. The first was a draft ordinance authorizing payment to Ross McDowell in the amount of it was actually 2 separate invoices, one for $4,725 and another for $4,900, for a total of $9,625. And this, both of these invoices were in relation to the formation of the CIC for the city of Barberton for the legal paperwork. The second piece of legislation was a draft ordinance titled Appropriation Local Coronavirus Relief Fund, and it had 3 appropriations on it. The first was in the amount of $3,328 from the unappropriated item of the Local Coronavirus Relief Fund, to the operation and maintenance budget of the local coronavirus relief fund. This was for PPE for the fire department. The second amount in this piece of legislation was $18,156 from the unappropriated item of the local coronavirus relief fund to the capital budget of the local coronavirus relief fund. This amount, the $18,156, was to replace computers that are used in the police cars and also to provide modems inside the police cars so that they have continuous Wi-Fi. The last piece of this draft ordinance was an amount of $909,251.67 from the unappropriated item of the local coronavirus relief fund to the personnel service budget of the local coronavirus relief fund. And that amount is for fire wages. The third piece of legislation that we had tonight was a draft ordinance titled Appropriation COVID-19 PSGP Fund. This is an appropriation in the amount of $500,000 from the unappropriated item of the Summit County COVID-19 PSGP Fund to the personnel service of the Summit County COVID-19 PSGP Fund. This $500,000 will be used for police wages. The fourth piece of legislation that we had tonight was titled Summit Akron Solid Waste Management Authority Solid Waste Management Plan. And this is to adopt the Summit County Solid Waste Management Plan by the Summit Akron Solid Waste Management Authority, doing business as Reworks for the city of Barberton. We all received an executive summary of what they do. The fifth piece of legislation we had tonight was a draft ordinance titled Disposal of Miscellaneous Items, and this is to authorize the city of Barberton to dispose of miscellaneous items in the municipal building or to sell these items on Gov Deals, including use. Sixth piece of legislation was a draft ordinance, which is a commendation for Barberton City Schools, commending and showing appreciation to the Barberton City School District, including the Barberton Board of Education, administrators, faculty, and students for working through the challenges associated with the current COVID-19 pandemic. The seventh piece of legislation was an appropriation referred to finance from utilities in the amount of $10,583.30. They're appropriating that amount from the unappropriated item of the water fund to the capital budget of the water fund. As I said, this was referred from utilities, and this amount represents a grant reimbursement for a shoring box that we needed for the water department. We had one late request for legislation and had to invoke Council Rule 702 to suspend Council Rule 302. And it is a draft ordinance titled Enter into Contract Medical Mutual, authorizing the mayor to enter into a one-year contract with Medical Mutual of Ohio through a partnership with Summit County Health Connection for employee benefits, which include medical, prescription, dental, and vision coverage beginning January 1st, 2020. The premium for this health care is the same as it was for 2020, and all employees will receive the same benefits as they did for 2020. The finance report for October was, we got the finance report for the month of October 2020, and Mr. Flaker gave us that report and explained where the different funds stand. We had no miscellaneous discussion. We adjourned at 7:17 p.m., and with that, I will pass.
Thank you very much. That concludes our committee of the whole meeting. Next up, we'll have the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just real quick, with the discussion on the moratorium proposal that was the council members who were on council the other year and those that are on council now who attended council previously you remember when we discussed medical marijuana, we talked about that piece of legislation. And one of the arguments that was made was that we're landlocked, and that we have tracts of land that we really need to look at what's best suited for that tract of land as it relates to other businesses, as it relates to proximity to highway access, things of that nature. So I just want to keep that in mind. We're just taking a step back and looking at our neighborhoods, looking at the community. There's programs through the state that have come out recently that we're looking to apply to. So just want to take a step back and look at these things. And a lot of the land that we do have, not city-owned, but land that's out there, they're old industrial tracts of land. They're not prepared right now for development. We do have funding available to help businesses clean that up and learn that we're doing that, but they're not there yet. So we have to be careful when looking at business development. Businesses do take note of what other businesses, when they're looking to move or expand, they do take note of what other businesses are in that area. So it is important that we have what the existing businesses are. And let's remember that true economic development includes livable wage jobs that lift the community. Moving on, the elections are over. It truly is a time for unity and to work for the common good throughout the nation, throughout the state of Ohio, here in Summit County, and especially here in the city of Arvin. We are all stronger together, and I know that talking to people at the county level, the state level, and federal level, they all share the same sentiment, no matter what side of the aisle people are on. There's a lot of work to do, and a lot of things that we have to all kind of work towards, and that's going to happen working together. It is getting darker earlier, and so please be aware, remind your constituents to be aware of those that may be walking. It seems like it starts by 6 p.m. now. Including school kids that may be walking home from practice or from school or from a friend's home or something. The weather, it's all over the place. It's northeast Ohio. Unseasonably warm, nice weather this past weekend. Pretty nice this week, some rain, and then dip down to some cooler temperatures. So things are really going to be changing. With that, leaf pickup is underway. It seemed like a lot of leaves dropped over the last week and a half or so. So the crews are out, really maintaining their schedule and taking advantage of the warm weather. So the stormwater grant that's in front of city council, this is just another example of some of the grant funding that we've applied to that really making a lot of headway, especially on stormwater. So over $1.4 million with the two streets, 15th Street and Arthur. So that doesn't include 14th Street, but making a lot of headway. This is grant money, it's competitive. So it does come to city government as well in summer. So for the first time in a long time, we're doing things, and getting our fair share, if you will. So you put this with the millions of dollars that we've been awarded through AMAS, and a lot of the grants we applied for, low interest loans, a lot of the programs we take advantage of for water lines and things of that. We're doing a lot of great things, a lot of momentum here in the community. As mentioned previously, this evening, the road paving program will be ramped up over the next few years, which accounts for AMAS projects. This is one of the first years with South Van Buren Avenue and Waterloo Road. These projects are throughout town over the next few years. An update on COVID. I want to share some numbers. We're seeing some great upticks throughout the nation, as you've seen in the news, here in the state of Ohio and in Summit County. So, for example, Ohio has reported 254, almost 255,000 confirmed cases. Last Tuesday, the number was 221,000. So, we're seeing over 33,000 cases in the state of Ohio confirmed in 1 week. Deaths throughout the state of Ohio is at 5,524. Tuesday last week was 5,340. So an increase there. Here in Summit County, there's been 8,898 cases. This is over 1,200 new cases from Tuesday of last week. The Summit County average for cases, the previous 7 days, so 14 days ago, that average for 7 days was 91 new cases. I just pulled off before the internet. Summit County average for this past week is 163.6. So a big uptick in the numbers. With Thanksgiving coming around, everybody's sick and tired of wearing masks. Everybody's tired of social distancing and not being with loved ones, family and friends. It's going to be even more difficult with Thanksgiving and the other holidays, but it's fine. It's still important to help slow the spread. Now more than ever, that we adhere to the mandates and the different rules. We're still seeing these updates. So I wanted to share that with you. Entities surrounding the CARES Act funding, there was a Facebook post about CARES Act funding and the property tax levy that was on the ballot. Talking about the funding that the CARES Act will provide to the city that we've received or will be receiving. But that post didn't tell the big picture. CARES Act funding, it's a one-time allocation. So what happens the following year after that, and the year after that? So we must look in more depth at what's going on. And that's the reason that we went to the voters for that property tax levy. So with the loss of the property tax levy, we have been working internally to look at various alternatives. I'm working on a presentation that looks at several different funding sources, revenues, expenses, that we're looking at internally. We've also been working on changing our operations internally. I'll get to that. So either next Monday or the following Monday, I plan on making a presentation to council after the meeting concerning these two measures. So we constantly look at our operations internally to how can we be more effective, more efficient, save money, generate money as well. And so we're continuing to do that. And some legislation has to be passed on what we've been working on. So I want to make that presentation hopefully next Monday or the Monday after that. And I apologize, timing wise, there's a lot on the docket next Monday, so add to that. I apologize now. Presentation's next week. But I'll go through it fairly quickly this next week. And then just lastly, city building will be closed this Wednesday for Veterans Day. And let's remember that the election's over. There's a lot of things going on in the country, but freedom is not free. And we need to pay respect to the veterans and honor the veterans throughout the nation that continue to that have put their life on the line and continue the service men and women that are out there continuing to defend us. The city building will be closed this Wednesday. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much. Anything from the good of the council or the department heads? Mr. Griffin.
Thank you, Mr. President. November the 28th, I have the honor of ringing the bell at Giant Eagle all day for Salvation Army. So I'm looking for some help. I have two people right here. Anybody interested in doing an afternoon of
What
28th?
day is it?
That's on a Saturday after Thanksgiving.
I'll be putting the Christmas lights, but I'll call it and they can arrange it for the week after.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll get times together. You know, these two guys, he's on 10 to 12 and.
No, I've got the 10 to 12.
You got 10 to
I
12,
got
so we
10 to
need
12.
somebody in the afternoon between 12 and I think we put it 7.
I have a question.
Yes,
They called me too, and I usually do it at Acme every year, and they said they didn't know if they were going to be able to go inside this
you
year.
know, Acme is out.
Acme is
Yeah, I was
out.
gonna do it at Acme inside for the 19th, but Acme is out. They're gonna do some kind of donation or something to Salvation Army.
Because
So
I said if it was outside, not knowing what the weather was gonna be like, I said I can't do that.
I
But,
I'm
anyway, I don't
not-
know if I'm even in town the day that you need somebody, but I'll find out. We'll let you know,
I'll be in town.
okay?
Put the Christmas lights
This
up.
is all outside.
Yeah.
1:30. You think you wanna do it, just let me know.
The cold doesn't bother me, so I'm in it.
Okay.
And what did it, you said 2 hours, then?
You can, 1 hour if you want.
I think last year I did 3 hours.
Okay.
Is it indoors over
Oh,
there?
no,
See,
outside.
that's,
Oh, don't know, see my hand, I don't have good circulation in my hands, I don't look like a dead person by the time I'm done.
Hey, nobody will complain about wearing masks and bringing the bell outside in the cold.
Oh, heck no. Yeah, it keeps you warm, it does.
No, I'm just waiting for another comment. I have something to say. As the mayor mentioned, November 11th is Veterans Day. I just wanted to publicly recognize Mr. Griffin and Mrs. Coburn, and thank any citizens and employees of the city and everybody across the board. I confirm today, as we probably all know, that the VFW is not holding a ceremony at the memorial. So with that, I have tried to figure out something. It's kind of last minute, but if you have anybody, I'm doing a roll call all day streaming Wednesday, starting at 7 a.m. It's going to rotate through every veteran information that I can get my hands on, pictures and ranks and time and service. It's not much. I know not everybody has it, but it's something. Good.
I wanted to piggyback on what you said, I saw in the paper, because usually HOD feeds the veterans on that day, and this year he's not going to. He said that he's gonna wait till Memorial Day, but just so people know that.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people like, hey, I'll see you at the ceremony. It's like, I don't think it's going on today or Wednesday, but
I would like to, thank Mr. Greer for his service as well. He's
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Right. Yes.
And I'm still doing interviews. So anybody have anybody, family members, starting with World War II vets, if you can find a World War I vet, that's the priority. So World War I, World War II, and then down Korea, Desert Storm, all the way out. And thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, this meeting is adjourned at 7:52.
My daughter is 50 years old. Yeah, that's the only picture I have with my daughter.
I got it.
I won't get there
You had a guess, calm me down.
I'm not young anymore.
Oh, yes, you are. Well, there we go.